Chapter 5. Water found, Axel lost. We followed this passage for 3 days. As we walked, I began to feel more and more tired. At first I could not understand this, but soon I realized why I was so tired. The path was going up, not down. Also the rocks were different. We were walking through younger rocks, where plants and animals were preserved in the rocks. I said this to my uncle, but he only nodded. I became angry. I picked up the shell of an insect preserved in the rock and showed it to my uncle. "Look at this," I said.
"Well,"
he said calmly,
"it is the shell of an insect preserved in the rock."
"But that means—"
"Yes, that means that we may have taken the wrong path. I may have made a mistake, but we cannot be sure until we reach the end of this passage."
So we continued to follow the eastern passage. We passed through walls of coal. I saw whole trees preserved in rock walls. But after 2 more days, we came to a blank wall ahead of us. There was no way past it. We had to go back to the crossroads and take the western passage. 3 days later, we reached the crossroads. I was tired and very thirsty. I had finished the water in my bottle. I fell to the ground. My uncle lifted me up and put his water bottle to my lips.
"Poor boy,"
he said.
"Drink this. It is the last of the water. I have saved it for you."
"Thank you, uncle," I said, and drank the last few drops of water. I immediately felt stronger. "Now, uncle," I whispered, "we must go back."
"Back?"
my uncle asked.
"And give up our journey? Never."
"Then we must die," I replied. I knew I would never persuade my uncle alone. I turned to Hans. He shook his head and pointed to my uncle.
"Master,"
he said.
"Axel,"
my uncle said,
"give me 1 more day to find water. If we do not find water in the western passage tomorrow, we will go back together."
"Well," I replied, "so be it. Do as you wish." And we set off into the western passage. The passage led down through older rocks. We walked all day. I could hardly go on because of my dreadful thirst. And then I heard a noise. It was the noise of running water. Somewhere on the other side of the wall of rock there was an underground river. We put our ears to the rock. Hans moved along the wall, listening carefully to the water. Where the noise of the running water was loudest, he lifted his pickaxe and hit the rock. He worked calmly to make a hole. The rock wall was thick, but after an hour of hard work, Hans had made a large hole in the wall. My uncle was impatient. He did not want to wait. He offered to help Hans. But before he could pick up the axe, there was a hissing sound. A strong jet of water burst out of the wall of rock. It was so strong that it almost knocked Hans down. He cried out in pain when the water hit him. I put my hand into the water and soon understood why. The water was very hot, almost boiling. "The water is boiling!" I exclaimed.
"Well, in the open air it will soon cool down,"
said my uncle. The water quickly cooled down. We did not wait until it was cold before we drank it. It tasted better than any water I had ever tasted before. We drank until we were not thirsty any more. Before we left this place, we filled our bottles. We decided to leave the hole in the wall as it was. The underground river would now run beside us as we descended. It would show us the quickest way down. I felt much better. I was eager to continue our journey. I had no thoughts now of going back. The path continued westward. Now we started to go down again. The rocks were shaped like steps, and we descended quickly. Each day my uncle used his scientific instruments to calculate our position. One day he told me that we were now 200 kilometers west of our starting point. "That means we are under the sea," I exclaimed.
"You are right, my boy,"
my uncle said with a smile.
"We are under the Atlantic Ocean."
We travelled more quickly now. My legs were used to walking, and I was not so easily tired. Sometimes I felt a pain in my ears, but I knew that this was due to the increased air pressure.
Breathe quickly,
My uncle said.
that will relieve the pressure.
I tried this and found that my uncle was right, as usual. By August the 7th, we were 125 kilometres below the Earth's surface and about 845 kilometres from Iceland. That day, the passage descended quite gently. I was in front of Hans and the professor. The torch I carried lit our way. We walked in silence as usual. Suddenly, I turned around to speak to my uncle, but he was not there. Neither was Hans. I was alone. I have been walking too fast, I said to myself. I'll wait for them to catch up with me. But after a quarter of an hour, there was no sign of them. I called out, but there was no answer. Well, there is no need to worry, I thought. I will go back and meet them. I only need to follow the water. I bent down to put my hands in the water, but my hands touched dry rock. I was lost. I would die of hunger and thirst. "Oh, Uncle!" I cried out in despair. I decided to go back up the path. Somewhere I had taken a wrong turning. If I went back, I would find the true path. I walked upwards for half an hour. Then I walked straight into a wall of rock and fell down. I had reached a dead end. There was no way forward. I had dropped my torch when I fell down, and now it was broken. I lay in complete darkness. I stood up and ran back down the path, waving my arms and shouting like a madman. I ran against the rocks and cut myself. At last, I fell on the floor and fainted. Chapter 5. Water found, Axel lost.